mother teaching you how to use a shield?
Yes, I know how to use a shield.
Your mother was a famous shield maiden.
Was?
Is.
I discovered that there was a certain amount of ambivalence in the books I was reading about shield maidens and whether they really existed. Viking society's attitude towards women was far more enlightened than the Franks or the Saxons.
You bear a strong resemblance to my ex-wife.
Women could own property, divorce their husbands, fight, rule sometimes. It seemed perfectly logical, therefore, that they had to fight. So I was quite determined from the start not only to have a major female character who wasn't just going to be a housewife, but to have women fighting alongside men. There was some pushback on that. There was some resistance to that idea.
It's always been a source of great controversy in Viking studies whether these women, these warrior women, were real or a part of the mythology. These are great warrior heroines doing brave things and sacrificing themselves for the sake of their lovers or taking power in their own right.
The gods will always smile on brave women, like the Valkyries, those furies who men fear and desire.
Don't you prefer her because she's a shield maiden, a warrior? My mother was the shield maiden Brunhilde.
The classic image of the shield maiden is very much one that derives from the written sources. So these are after the Viking Age. The key question is how valid are they for the Viking Age itself? And from those texts, quite frankly, we can't really say. They might go back to real living people who did this. They might be heroic embellishments. But the way to try and nuance that picture, to go back to the real Viking Age, is to look at the archaeology. Now, we find a lot of these. They're all from the late 9th and 10th century. The design is of a figure on a horse with a standing figure in front of the horse, and both of them appear to be female. And the really crucial thing about these is that both of them are armed. And just from these alone, we can start to make tentative reconstructions of what these kinds of figures would have looked like if they were real. What does it mean? Because it quite clearly meant something in the Viking Age. The first thing that we can say about this is that the idea of the armed woman is absolutely there in the Viking mind. But that still doesn't tell us whether or not these depict supernatural women or whether they really were female warriors in the Viking Age. Now, we come to another new find that was actually dug out of a block of frozen soil in New Year 2012, so a very recent find at a place called Horby in Denmark. And for the first time, instead of these two-dimensional flat pendants, we find a three-dimensional actual model of a warrior woman. She has the same facial features of other pendants that we find with female faces. She's holding a shield with the same swirling patterns as we find on these flat ones, and a sword. What archaeology is now starting to show is that there are images of armed women from the Viking Age. For a long time, we've known that there are occasional finds of the burials of women with weapons in the grave, but we haven't been finding what we would call warrior burials of women. Until relatively recently, when a grave from a site called Birka, a grave excavated actually in the 1870s, so a long time ago, absolutely packed with weapons. We can see it here, 2 shields, a sword, 2 spears, an axe, a fighting knife, and for a long time this has been reconstructed in the books and exhibitions as one of the absolute classic warrior graves of the Viking Age. Fine. But recently, a team of osteologists, these are archaeologists specializing in the study of bones, led by a very talented Stockholm researcher called Anna Källström, has been looking at the skeleton from this grave. And I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to say. It's the body of a woman. So, this is a woman buried with this absolute massive collection of weapons. On the same basis as we tend to interpret most graves, this would be the burial of a shield maiden. When we take the two-dimensional figures, the new three-dimensional figure from Horby and the grave from Birka, that adds up to a pretty compelling picture of what these warrior women may actually have looked like. And the really important part of this is that all these finds are from the Viking Age itself. These are not from the literary text world of the sagas. This is the Viking Age as it really was. To be clear that there's a range of scholarly opinions on this, but certainly I think it's really quite probable that these women were real.